All right, let's bring him on. There he is, the man himself, Mr. Parris Mayhew. What's up, Parris? How you doing?
I'm exhausted, and I got to apologize for being late. I worked today on a TV show, and I literally came home and fell asleep, and I turned around to grab my phone, and I saw your text, and I was like,
Hey, man, it happens, man. We understand, man. You know, these days, especially, like I said, especially now, like you said, you're back to work. So, no biggie, man. Thanks for coming on. You know, I appreciate you coming on, and getting up and, hopefully we're not waking you too much out of your slumber there, but,
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you understand, because I really do appreciate, sharing your audience with me. And I really appreciate it. And I didn't want to make it seem like I didn't.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you'd flake like that, so I figured it was a reason, man. All good, man. Well, anyway, let's go ahead, man. Let's talk about what's been going on with you, man. It's been a while. I think about 20 years now. I think since we've heard new music from you, and here you are now. You've got your new project here, Aggros. You got the new song and video, Chaos Magic. That's out, man. It's got the classic, elements from your tone and style that we're all used to, from the Cro-Mags days. And, when we did the interview together last year, I remember you mentioned that you had plenty of material that you'd been working on over the years, but that, it'd been sort of difficult to find other musicians to sort of work with you. And maybe, just because you'd have some guys that were around and they'd leave, just to really keep the lineup consistent. I know that was kind of, a little bit of a struggle for you to put together a full band. So here it is, you're doing your own thing. So I guess go ahead and just talk about, the new video, the song, how it came about, especially the video. I mean, the video is really awesome. It's got all the, that dark New York City, like reminds me of like when I was going to shows in Manhattan and coming home at night and there's no one around, and, it has that kind of vibe to it, which I love. So go ahead and just tell us about, the new song and the video and how it all came about, man.
Well, that feeling that you just expressed was exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to show New York from a New Yorker's point of view, and not from the point of view of a tourist or from watching Sex and the City or Gossip Girl. Yeah. I wanted it to be more like Fort Apache, the Bronx, or the Warriors.
Sure.
To have the feeling that that New York City has in those moments when it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you just came from a show and you're walking across the Williamsburg Bridge and you're looking back at the city all by yourself and basking in the sodium vapor light that New York used to be so beautifully bathed in, but you can only find it in certain places. And that's why I ended up shooting on the Williamsburg Bridge, because I feel like it's one of the places that's frozen in time from our youth. That like literally, if you go up on the bridge today, it's really no different than it was, the first time I went up there 40 years ago or whatever it was. And so I, just trying to keep a close association or what I call a regional imprint on my music, because I feel to a large extent that I'm a product of the city and my music is a product of the city. And I thought that visual imprint would be important. And then I didn't even realize what I was doing. Now I can't imagine anybody who's seen the video who comes to New York and walks across the bridge at midnight not feeling like they're connected to the song.
Sure, yeah.
I didn't do that on purpose, but I hope that'll be a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
But in terms of like what the conversation we had last time, I try to always, and I don't try, I just play all the time, write all the time. And I did attempt many, many times to play with other people. And I auditioned 1,000 singers and I auditioned 1,000 drummers, and I played with certain people from time to time. But I just wasn't really getting what I needed out of it. I wasn't getting a reciprocal musical relationship. I didn't really feel like anybody was bringing something to the plate. And every time I did play with somebody, like I played with this drummer Cobbs, who played on the recording, played really excellently on the recording, but he was always pressuring me to get anybody to just fill the space. And he would bring in like his friends you know, and he thought there was something important about somebody else standing in the room and playing the songs with us. And I said, well, you're not the one who's going to have to teach them these extraordinarily difficult parts,
Right.
and then live with how terribly they play them. And so, you know, I felt, I kept telling him, if they don't come to the table with something, I mean, even if he had brought somebody with great skill to the table and they were able to execute the songs, what else did they bring? I didn't need a placeholder.
Sure.
So we didn't really get along that in it musically that way, because he had different kinds of goals than I had. My goal was to make music the best I could, and his goal was to get 5 people in a room and then go play some little place for 25 of his friends, and that just wasn't what I was interested in. So, and I want, you know, to me, the whole pleasure of playing music is getting it from beginning to end. You know, the discovery of picking up your guitar and playing it and playing it and playing it till you find, you know, pan for gold, until you find something that pleases you, and then you just keep doing it till you find another piece, and then you know, they're basically puzzle pieces, and some of those puzzle pieces you collect and you put in your back pocket for years. And then one day you strike another chord that hits you, and you realize, oh, I can put that together with that. And when you spend so much time and thought assembling these puzzles, you don't want them just to be thrown out there. And, you know, also that became an issue with vocals. You know, to a large extent, I wrote almost all the music I've ever written as instrumental, and you know, trying to make it as interesting as possible just as music and feel complete. And then I would always be stuck with whatever someone put on it who just happened to be there at the time, be it any of the singers that I've ever worked with at the time. And then I'm stuck with what they have to say. And unfortunately, I haven't felt like any of the things that they said were relevant to anything in my life. So I didn't want another person speaking for me.
Okay.
And I feel like the music speaks for itself anyway. It's a complete musical thought. I feel like at every point in the song, you feel like you're being led to where you need to go, and that there's nothing missing. Maybe I won't feel that way about all the music I write, but I certainly feel that way about Chaos Magic. And so I did all the parts myself, and played it the way I wrote it. And it feels complete to me. And of course, Cobb's drumming is spectacular.
Yeah.
He's a spectacular musician. He just likes different music than I do. He's like a death metal guy.
Okay.
And he's always like, can't we be a death metal band? And I was just looking at him and go, I was like, yeah, I get you want to do that. I don't really do that. This is what I do. And he's like, okay. And then and then at some point he even said to me, he goes, if I put together a death metal band, will you be in it? I said, well, I'll do it if I don't have to write any songs, and if we'll keep playing my songs on the
Right.
you know? And he said, okay. So I tried that for a while, and it just didn't work. It was the funny thing is, we got together once, and like me and like 2 of his friends, one of them became my friend. We played, and it was absolutely awesome. For 2 jams, we had this great jam, and then it just fell apart for God knows what reason. I have no idea, but I kept saying, let's do it again, and they never did. So I just went forward with doing what I was doing. But Chaos Magic was something, you know, I wrote over the years, and I completed it recently. And I took advantage of the pandemic to shoot the video. And I literally spent so much time shooting it. You know, I really might have set myself up for a failure for the second video, because I don't know how I'm going to put that much effort in the second one, but I will. I'll figure something out.
Well, yeah. Well, speaking of, I mean, I think I read that, you know, your plan going forward with Aggros is to do just that, right? Release a single at a time with a video for each, which is something I know a lot of, you know, musicians are starting to do, instead of releasing, you know, just a full length album, you know, because obviously there's such a, you know, the average music listener's got such a short attention span these days that it just makes no sense. You know, the market's so saturated with, you know, streaming and everything. So, I mean, I guess go ahead and talk about your plans in terms of, is that what you're going to actually do then, is just take it slow, release a song here or there with a video, and just kind of take it from there?
I mean, my plan is to make music I like and
Mm.
put it out at the pace that suits uh, my creative output. Like if I really like to put a lot of time into making a music video or writing a song.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a bunch of songs recorded with a
Okay.
bunch of different drummers.
Okay.
And I am planning to put all those songs out, but it will be with a video, and that's what's going to slow it down. Because I'm not on a record label's timetable. Nobody's telling me you have to do this by this time, and you're going on tour. And since there's no touring, I'm definitely under no pressure at all. It actually serves me to stretch it out. Because say if we're looking at a year before real shows start happening again, if I can spread 6 or 7 songs out over the next year with a solid video, then I'll have then I'll be basically setting myself up for that tour. Whereas most bands would put out an entire album and tour a month later, I'm going to basically be reintroducing myself to anybody who's interested, and by the time they have a little catalog of what I'm doing, it'll be time to take on the road. And who knows where it'll be at that point, because I put out the video, and within 2 days I started getting texts from people saying things like, Aggros, I want in.
Oh, right. Wow. Very cool.
So in 6 months, my little thing might be our little thing.
Very cool.
And I'm totally open to that. I mean, I even told my wife, who's my partner in everything, I said that my plan is to put out the song and reintroduce myself, but it's also an invitation. If Rob Halford wants to come and sing on Chaos Magic, he's more than welcome.
Sure.
Yeah.
No question. Well, Parris, I wanted to go back to that singer thing just for a minute, and I wanted to ask, based on what you said about how difficult it is to find a singer to portray the message and to portray what you want it to be. Have you, or do you consider writing the lyrics so that it does say exactly what you want to say, and then just finding a voice to fulfill your message?
I've certainly considered that, but it's one of those things where you like that old saying, you don't hire a professional and not take his advice. You don't find an artist and then not let him do what he does. I figure it, like my statement before about finding somebody who brings something to the table. I want somebody who has something to say, and I want, when they sing it, to mean it. And I don't want to be their puppeteer. I mean, if I was lucky enough to find someone like Roger Daltrey, who was willing to do that and had a fucking great voice like him, maybe it'd be a different story. But I really would like to have somebody who had a voice, a singular voice, and a message, or at least a poetic voice. Like Chris Cornell. The guy was a walking, talking poet,
right?
And the fact that he had the greatest voice in the world, he probably could have said "eeny, meeny, miny, mo," and we would have loved it. But he just also happened to be an extremely articulate. He had the ability to paint a picture with a couple of words that was just fantastic. And I would love to find that. I would love to find a Lane, a Bon Scott. I'm not looking for a type, really. All those people, like an HR from the Bad Brains,
Sure.
all these people, Johnny Rotten, they just had these singular presences with their voices. And the one of the things that I found that was so extraordinary was when I would audition people, I would say, just pick up your iPhone and turn on the camera and record yourself singing for 1 minute. And almost nobody would do it. They would all say, "Oh, I don't feel comfortable with that." And I said, "Well, that's because you're not a singer. If you walked up to Liza Minnelli on the street and you said, 'Liza, would you sing me?' She would just start singing.
Right.
Before you even got the words out of your mouth. You know why? Because Liza Minnelli is a singer.
Right.
Sure.
Certainly.
She loves singing, and if you ask a singer to sing and he says, 'Oh, I don't feel comfortable with this. I would like to do a proper demo.' Give me a fucking break. If I wanted to be in a band and somebody said to me, 'Make a video for 1 minute of you playing bass,' I would make a video that would get me in that band."
Sure. I'm going to devil's advocate that this just for a minute, though. you're an intimidating guy. Maybe you don't think so, but I think the world thinks so. And the flip side of that would be, oh my God, I got 1 minute to make or break my chance to work with this guy who's, legendary. Obviously your Cro-Mags stuff is legendary. Age of Quarrel is a legendary record. And now you're putting them on the spot to give you 1 minute to determine if they can work with you. Do you not see that as intimidating for a singer that would want to work with you, and maybe you could work with in the future if you had more time to sit down with them and understand what they do?
Do you think Rob Halford is intimidated by me?
Oh, Rob Halford, he might have been. I don't think Rob Halford is now, but I'll bet you Rob Halford in 1975 would have been.
Perhaps. But I'm not looking for somebody to show up enamored with the past. I, in a lot of ways, would prefer to find somebody who doesn't know anything about the Cro-Mags and is just interested in playing this new batch of music. I actually was working with a singer for a little while.
Okay.
And he was a young actor, trained singer, perfect pitch. And we he didn't know anything about the Cro-Mags. And one of the things that he was concerned about was that he would be overshadowed by the past. And I told him, it's going to be just like anything else. By the time a band picks up steam, 90% of their fans are new. And all they'll care about is what we're doing now. And it's just, that same phenomenon happened in the Cro-Mags. There were people who discovered Best Wishes and just went back and listened to Age of Quarrel and didn't get it. And there were people who bought Revenge and tried to go back. They were like, oh, I love this. I'm going to go back and listen to these other albums. And they just didn't get Age of Quarrel. I guess it depends on the context. But the only reason it didn't work out with him is because he was like always getting jobs. Like one day he calls me up and we worked on 2 songs that I thought were great. And then he goes, oh, I got the job being Danny Zuko in Greece in London. Okay. and he was gone for a year. And then he came back, and then we jammed here for like 2 weeks, and then he disappeared again. He's following his opportunities. I don't think he really had the perspective to really realize that what we were doing in this room would go somewhere. That's another problem when you deal with these young musicians. They start saying things like, well, I want to make sure we can rehearse in Queens because I have my job and all. I'm like, I don't intend to make a career. I always tried to let them know I don't. You don't realize how close we are to what it is you think you want as a musician, which is touring and making records and stuff like that. I realize how close it is because all I did was record a song in an afternoon, make a video and put it out. And here we are. I know how fast it works. If you have a past and I knew that past would carry me somewhere quickly, and it's just hard to make them understand that. But that's why it didn't work out with him. And it wasn't like a creative differences. It was like we didn't like each other. It wasn't scheduling. It was just that he had a different, he had a different path.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for people anymore. That was another thing. It's like I to a large extent, I say, I work in the film business and it takes up all my time. And it does. I work 13, 14 hours a day, 5 days a week for the past 20 years. And it's an exhausting, fulfilling and great paying job. And I love it. And it's fantastic. But I have all along tried to play music with other people. It just hasn't worked out.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely.
And so, but when I say it hasn't worked out to a large extent, it was because I was waiting for people. Like there was this guitar player I played with for a long time, and I kept attaching something to him that I didn't need. Like I'm a team player. I work great in a film crew. I love the idea of being in a band. I love this mythical Aerosmith Beatles thing where you have all these people that contribute equally, and that's what makes it such a spectacular thing. But I've always been in a band where I came to the plate with mostly everything creative, and everybody else just kind of executed what I did, and I didn't get along with them. I always dreamt of that thing where somebody else would come in and play me a song that would blow me away. And then the other guy would say, oh, I've got a part for that. I just never had that. But I met this guitar player and this bass player, and I was playing with them. And I really tried to encourage them. And I coddled them to a large extent that it got to the point where they were like, let's play this kind of thing. And, it was almost like the way Cobb said to me, can we play death metal? This guy was saying to me, can we be more like the Black Crowes? And I go, well, I really like the Black Crowes, but that's not what I do.
Right.
So you end up going in all these directions, trying to like cater to the needs of other people in the band, but they're not. But if their needs don't take you anywhere, it just becomes like this endless coddling. And I just decided just to do it by myself.
Right.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, speaking of that too, I mean, just from obviously, our discussions last year too. I mean, you're someone who's. It's interesting how you sort of create your sound because your influences aren't usually the typical influences, obviously, that you hear out of punk and hardcore. Exactly, right there. Exactly. Rush. I know you're into a lot of the progressive stuff. I know Led Zeppelin. You said you're a big fan of. Usually, hardcore. I mean, I know you're also very influenced by Motorhead, so I'm assuming that's where a lot of your hardcore style comes from, is from that influence. But most people who play your type of music are it's more punk or influenced. It's not really the classic rock, progressive rock type of influences that most have. So how did your guitar set? Because you've got such unique sound. I mean, it has this distinctive sort of, I call it like a wail. It just it's like almost like it's like a voice to it at the end of it. It doesn't just end. The riff doesn't just end. It can almost continues. It's very finite, I guess is the word I would use. Where did your sound come from? I mean, what's really, how did you sort of come up with that style that's so unique and that really sort of created that really classic, New York hardcore guitar sound, from back when Age of Quarrel came out?
I mean, I'd imagine it's a conglomeration of a lot of things. I'm just a fan of music. I love, Led Zeppelin is my favorite band, and I love the Sex Pistols and Motorhead just as much as I love Led Zeppelin. And I just don't do what Zeppelin does. I just do what I do, and earlier in my musical life, I guess I kind of mentally aspired to be like Yes and Rush and these bands. When I say mentally, because even to this day, I'm not anywhere in terms of skill or on the level of someone like Steve Howe. Steve Howe is just an extraordinary guy, but I've certainly collected little things from Steve Howe, and I collected little things from Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee and definitely Lemmy. But I think the turning point was when I started, listening to bands like Motorhead or heard bands like Motorhead for the first time in the Sex Pistols, and realized that they moved me just as much as Rush did, or Aerosmith or Van Halen. And I was seeing bands in clubs that moved me the way these stadium bands that I thought were completely untouchable did. And so I applied what I could do to my aspirations. And I just started playing, and I never tried to figure out how to play Yes songs or Rush songs or anything. To this day, if somebody came over and they were like, "Hey, let's jam a Led Zeppelin song," I couldn't do it because not that I couldn't do it, I just won't do it. I just have no interest in playing other people's music.
Okay.
So I just started writing my own songs and playing them over and over and over and over till I got incredibly good at playing my own songs. I mean, most of the songs, not most of the songs, but to a large extent, a lot of the songs on Age of Quarrel, I was playing to the peak of my ability when I wrote them. When I wrote World Peace, I was playing it as hard and as fast as I could, and I could just barely achieve the performance by writing the song. And that went and that continued with Best Wishes. A song like Down But Not Out was a riff that I would just sat in my room and played it as hard and as fast as I could to the peak of my ability, playing as many changes as I could make it happen to kind of at least resemble the complexity of a Rush or a Yes, but within the context of what I did. And then, even if you listen to a song like Chaos Magic, there are parts on there that, I'm literally playing to the peak of my ability. And I remember when, early on, I was one of my musical friends, which was the greatest thing about being a musician, was having this like little circle of friends in New York. And one of my friends was Mark from Carnivore. What a pleasure that is, just that one of my pals was in Carnivore. Another one of my pals was in Murphy's Law, and people like, the guys I knew in the Bad Brains. Just having that was a spectacular thing. But Mark used to always talk about this idea of playing to the peak of your ability. And he learned that when he joined the Crumbsuckers. And he said when suddenly he was playing these songs where every single song he performed was literally like, if it was just a little bit harder, he wouldn't be able to perform it.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's just where this part of my style comes from. It's just me playing the heart to the peak of my ability every time. I don't know why. I mean, it won't be like that with every song, because I have a bunch of songs that are coming out that doesn't take a lot of physical skill to play, but I think they still sound like me. Like, it's funny that you were talking about that thing about the guitar having a voice, because I do have this song called "I See Light," and I'm actually juggling the idea of what song to start the next video for, and it'll probably just be based on an idea I come up with that connects with the song. But there's a slide guitar part in the song "I See Light," oddly enough, and it sounds like singing. And I almost want to make the video just so I could put it out and be like, oh, here's this really cool thing I did. My wife always jokes. She goes, it's like on some comedy show, which I've never seen, where, every time she hears someone playing guitar a lot, she goes, look what I can do. Do you know what that is? It's like some kind of comedy thing. Like, this guy dances around. He says, look what I can do. So whenever, like, I play a band like Polyphia or Yngwie and someone's playing really crazy, you hear my wife in the other room go, look what I can do. Look what I can do. But anyway, I felt that way about this song. Even though it's not complex, it does sound like it sounds almost like a chorus of people singing. And that's what I search for when I'm playing my guitar all the time, is to find something that's unusual. If you can't be surprising with music, then it just becomes boring. And I think that's what I really tried to do with Chaos Magic, was to do what I do. I just couldn't help but do what I do, but I also try to do something surprising. But so that's like that the riff that goes from the slow part to the fast part, I just tried to play something that I'd never heard anybody play before. And I had seen this band in Texas. I was mentioning this to somebody the other day, because I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but I was just down in Texas, and I went into this little club, and there was this band called Spunk, Spunk. Okay. And they were just a bunch of Texas boys, and they were playing some crazy fucking music that made absolutely no sense to me. It seemed like all of them were playing something different, but they were all playing together, and it was fantastic. And it just gave me a little perspective on how a riff doesn't just have to be boom tap boom tap, AC/DC style. Not that I ever did that before, but it was really unhinged. So I think as a result, even though I wrote the song like many, many years later, that I was absolutely thinking of them when I wrote that.
Oh, wow. Oh, very cool. Very awesome, man. Well, Parris, having grown up myself in New York and going to, New York hardcore shows and being around the scene itself and the people that encompass it, from what I can gather, just as an observant person who's a fan of your music, and I've had obviously the opportunity to speak to you before this, and this is in no way to be perceived in a negative manner. In fact, it's really completely the opposite of that. But even though you've been so influential musically on the New York hardcore scene, as well as your video production stuff that you've done with all those bands in the 90s, Biohazard, Typo Negative, so many bands that you did videos for, you've obviously are a huge part that's made the scene what it is today, 35 plus years later. It just seems to me like you are a bit of an outlier within the community of New York hardcore in terms of, your musical peers. I mean, even going back to the early days, to me, you seem like a very more of an individualistic person who, you think outside the box, where you're inside a community in New York hardcore where they prefer mostly to stay within certain parameters, whether it be musically as well as, when it comes to self-expression and communication. And it's interesting because your name does seem to get overlooked a lot when discussions arise about the old-time great, musicians and people within the New York hardcore scene. Do you feel like sometimes you don't get the respect you deserve within the community because you're an individual who seems to, not really have any interest in sort of inserting yourself into the social fabric of that New York hard community? It really is.
I can't speak to that. I don't hang out on street corners anymore, so I don't know what they're saying. But when I was standing on a street corner, the thing that appealed to me about music was all the bands that were called hardcore. It's very similar to this whole phenomenon of grunge. Like,
Mhm.
tell me what the fuck does Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam have in common?
Mhm.
Seattle.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
got
that's it. The
you
music.
know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
Nirvana and Screaming Trees,
Mhm.
Soundgarden. You know, the thing that was extraordinary about that scene, even though they somehow clumped it together and called it grunge, was there were all these bands that were doing something cool, and they were doing something their own. You know,
Mhm.
and that's what was the strength of the New York hardcore scene that appealed to me. As a music fan, I wasn't going there to go to see hardcore. I was
Mhm.
going there to see this extraordinary mixing pot of creative people, and as little as uh, Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam had in common, it's the same with the Misfits and the Bad Brains, or or the Cro-Mags and the Dead Kennedys. You know, all
Mhm.
those bands to me were doing something really, really cool and really, really special and really, really their own signature thing. But they were all very, very, very different. So um, there was no real blueprint. There was no uniform. There was no set, ethic. It was all being made up as we were going along. It was
Mm.
literally like every day you'd go downtown, somebody would have come up with some new thing or new word or slang. Like all the kids that I used to hang out with, you know, they had their own slang on this 4 block radius of Avenue A that was totally different than the kids that I knew in high school.
Mhm.
And and everybody was making this great individual music. And people say to me, well, what do you think of the hardcore scene today? And I really can't speak to it because I'm not there all the time listening to all the bands. I'm sure there's a lot of great bands. But what I see as a result of what we did back then, of this spark of all these individual bands, and if you really want to see a trail from where that went and the influences and the impact it had on music, I wouldn't even look within the hardcore scene. I would look out in the world. Like if you look at a band like System of a Down, that
Mhm.
band is so influenced by the Dead Kennedys, it's unbelievable. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't listen to the System of the Down without thinking of the Dead Kennedys.
Right.
Mhm.
And when I hear Slipknot, I think they are way more akin to what or where, like, to the Crumbsuckers and the Cro-Mags than anything that I've heard. Not that I've heard a lot, but
Mhm.
when I do hear Slipknot, I hear a hardcore band that can play really, really well and write creative and crazy creative stuff.
Mhm.
And this, so I know a lot of people will like poo poo that, but that's what I see. If somebody like transported me from the street corner in 1983 when I was like listening to the Dead Kennedys all the time, and they transport, all of a sudden I was transported, and somebody sat me down and played me System of a Down and Slipknot, I'd be like, wow, they
Right.
got really
Mhm.
good fast.
That's right. Mhm.
These guys, are they from our block?
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
I definitely see the effect or the ripple of what we did back then. But I just don't necessarily see it being called hardcore. And you know, I'm open to hearing everything and anything. I like I said, I'm a fan of music. I love the Crumbsuckers. I
Sure.
loved
Mhm.
Minor Threat. I loved Black Flag. And again, none of those. Like, what the hell do the Crumbsuckers and Minor Threat have in common?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
No,
good point. Yeah.
you're
No, good
right,
point.
man.
Yeah.
Paris, I wanted to go back to where you were talking about how you have a plan to release music, where you were saying that you've got 6 or 7 songs that you're planning to release, with videos and basically, I don't think it's you adapting to the way music is today as much as it's just the way you want to do music now. And I'm curious, do you think that music itself, the profession of music, has become so commercialized and disposable that it's almost impossible to create something like an Age of Quarrel, as an example, that has legs that will live for 30, 40, 50, 100 years and will always be referred to. But in today's world, we just don't have that because of the technology has made it almost impossible to create something mammoth that has the legs. Do you agree or no?
I don't know. I mean, in personal relationships, you teach people with every interaction how to treat you, and they know the parameters of what they can get away with and what they can't, because you teach them that by saying no.
Right.
And we can also teach people a new context for music. And not that I'm have such a master plan, but I'm not concerned with the attention span, today's attention span. I'm going to make the music exactly the way I feel like making it. I'm going to package it the best I can.
Sure.
Because I have this ability to make film. It's just something I can do, and it's something I love doing, and I want to make a video for every single song. So every single song will have some kind of visual message attached to it, and it will have value, and it'll give you something to go back to over and over again. I mean, you can watch Chaos Magic. I know people that told me I've watched the video 50 times. I was like, have you noticed the rats yet? And they're like, what? I said, there's at least 50 rats in the video. And they're like, oh my God, I got to go back and look.
Right.
And I hid all kinds of things. There are helicopters, rats, all kinds of crap in the video. But I figure by doing this, by taking it so seriously and putting so much effort into it, I will teach people how to appreciate my stuff. If they don't stop in their tracks and say, this is something better, this is something special, this is, at least in terms of the effort that's put in. I'm not going to make any judgment on whether it's good or bad. I just for them, I'm just saying that if they're not able to recognize the effort that's put in, then I don't, then it's not for them.
Sure.
So in that way, I feel like I'm teaching them. Like none of my music is going to be free. Like I'm not putting anything on Spotify or anything like that. I have my website. You can, if you want to buy my song, you can buy it from my website. It won't be available anywhere else.
Okay.
And I will make. I'm planning to make a 7-inch of Chaos Magic, and the next 3 songs that I put out will be a 4-song EP. But this, I mean, it certainly isn't a commercial adventure. I hope to play shows and travel the world and play my music, and I hope for it to support itself. But I don't, I have no interest in signing to a record label. I don't even know what they do anymore.
Right.
And I'm not worried about those things. I'm not worried about I'm not worried about what the budget of my video is, because I'm doing it. I'm going to put everything I have into it to make it as good as it can. Because every song that I write, it's part of me. Just like every song on Age of Quarrel is part of me, except for 1 or 2. And I feel connected to them, whether, why wouldn't I? They're mine.
Sure. No, you're right. Now is one aspect more important than the other? Is the song more important than the video, or the video more important than the song? Because it seems like you have more attachment, and maybe it's because your day-to-day life is in the movie and TV world, that the video is more important than maybe other musicians would give it.
Well, I mean, I certainly put in more effort than anybody else would do, but the only thing I can, like I said, it's not for me to say, but I don't think anybody would watch the video if they didn't like the music.
Fair enough.
No matter how good it was.
True.
I mean, there are tons of big, huge budget videos that no one ever saw. It's like, even, Biohazard, for example, I did videos for them that cost $10,000 that got played on MTV and got them to headline Dynamo. And then the first video they did that I didn't direct cost $100,000, and MTV rejected it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it's definitely crazy how that all works. I wanted to talk to you real quickly too about the TV or the video world, I guess TV and movies. I read an interview that you did. I'm not even sure when you did it, but where you said that the people that work in the movie industry are just so much more professional than the people in the recording industry. Why do you feel like it is that way? You would think that there's more maybe it's just me being stupid, but I would think that there's more opportunities to get work in the the movie industry where people would be less focused, where there's so few opportunities to actually excel in the music industry. But it from what you were saying, it really seems like it's quite the opposite, that the people are very professional in the movie world because they have to be, or maybe I misread it, but
No, that's exactly right. For example, the average TV show that I work on, it costs production $55,000 an hour
wow.
to have the crew on set. So, you waste 10 minutes and that's a lot of money.
Right.
And we don't waste time on set. People show up, they do their jobs, they do it really, really well. They don't complain, they don't boo-hoo, and they execute. And if they don't, there's somebody standing in line behind them who can. So the thing about the film business is the people that succeed, the people who excel succeed. It's not like one of these businesses like in the record business. The record business is just crowded with people who fail up and support their other failure friends. I'm talking about on the business side, in the record labels and stuff. People that are competent get pushed out. They will expose the incompetence, and I saw that endlessly. There's no people don't go to Oxford to become A&R men.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Do you actually, and this is kind of an odd question, I guess, but do you enjoy the shows that you work on? Like, for the life of me, just knowing the little tiny bit that I know about you, which is basically, hardcore and Cro-Mags and whatnot, I don't see you as a guy sitting around watching Blue Bloods. I just can't fathom that you're sitting around, you and your wife holding hands at the prayer table at the end of the show. I mean,
at the family dinner.
Yeah, the family dinner.
I think. I mean, I got to tell you, I like Blue Bloods, and I really liked working on Blue Bloods. I think the primary reason I liked working on Blue Bloods is because the crew was so cool.
Okay.
Like the grips, I made friendships that have lasted. The director of photography was such a great guy, and the cherry on top is Donnie Wahlberg. He's the coolest fucking guy. And he's so cool to the crew, and he's so cool to everybody on set. And he always made it fun. Like, he would stop in the middle of shooting, and, we'd be shooting on the street, and he would just say, stop. And he would run across the street and take selfies with like 20 fans and sign autographs. And he'd come back and say, who wants McDonald's? And he'd order the entire crew McDonald's or whatever they wanted, just a high energy, positive guy. And, you don't have that kind of thing in almost any work environment. And, that was really great working on that show. But to your question more specifically, like I had the pleasure of I had watched the first season of The Americans, which I thought was a great show.
Loved it.
And one day I got called, and this was before I was working on a lot of television. The Americans was really the first TV show that I got in. Before that, I was doing television commercials, which is very lucrative and it's great work. And a lot of the people that I know on TV are like, I can't believe you gave up commercials to work on TV. I just like the team effort of working on a television show with the same crew for months and months. Whereas on commercials, it's just one day at a time. But I went into work in The Americans for one day to do one shot. And I went in, I did this one crazy long shot around the FBI office. And then the director of photography said to me, what are you doing for the next 4 months? And I became a regular crew member on Blue Bloods for the next 4 months. I mean, not Blue Bloods, but The Americans. And then they brought me back for the next season, which was season 4. So I was able to do 2 seasons. And then that DP cinematographer left The Americans, and then I never returned to that. I just went off to do other things. I did movies and TV shows. But when you finish 2 seasons of The Americans, you can't help but be proud of all the work you did, because every frame of that show is great. The acting is great. The cinematography is great. You're working with directors and producers who created and directed like the first season of the X-Files.
Right.
Those are the same people.
Right.
Dan Sackheim, you see, watch season 1 of the X-Files and you see Dan Sackheim's name every day. And I would go to work with him every day.
Wow.
That's awesome, man.
So, I mean, that to answer your question. And then I work on a lot of cool movies. I worked on A Dog's Purpose with Lasse Hallström, the director, who did Chocolat and Salmon Fishing in the Yemen. And the cinematographer was the guy who did both those movies, Terry Stacy. And I've done TV shows with him. And I did Den of Thieves with Gerard Butler. You know, it's, machine guns and explosions and cameras, and it's awesome.
Right.
Just the greatest thing. And then I get a check.
Most important thing, right?
Most importantly, no, dude, it's interesting. You mentioned the Americans. The Americans, if it did nothing else right, which I loved it. I hate that they ended that show. They could have kept that show going for another 10 years and I'd have been fine with it. But
me too.
The one thing that really made that show stand out, at least in my eyes, just as a fan, was how well they did the setting at, in the appropriate time. It was the only other show I can think of that comes off the top of my head that was so perfectly looking was that show Mindhunter that's on Netflix right now. Because and the only reason I know that is because in my other business they came out to I own a pinball place, so pinball and arcade, and Mindhunter came out and rented 30 of my games to build an arcade, and literally I had to go through with them for a day just going through the machines and saying, okay, well, when was this released? Oh, it was October of 81. No, we can't use that because the piece is set in April of 81. Wow. So it was really intense, and it really made me change my appreciation for how TV works. And like you said, it's $55,000 an hour. Well, I get it with, the fact that they sent a guy to spend 8 hours with me looking at pinball machines, to do and then when I saw it on Mindhunter, the whole scene with all my games in it was, I think, 46 seconds. And I was like, geez, man, 46 seconds. They spent $100,000 on this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. The art department on the Americans was great. I remember one time walking up to set and there were all these posters on the wall, and it's, they're in DC, and it was just when they had just hit the 80s. So there were all these hardcore posters, like SOA, Henry Rollins' band.
Sure.
And I saw the poster and I just thought, that is so cool. And then someone mentioned like, oh, you should get them to put Cro-Mags posters up. I was like, we weren't around in 1980.
Yeah. Great. True. Well, Parris, why don't you go ahead, man? We're going to wrap it up here. Why don't you go ahead and let the audience know, do the plugs, let them know where they can, listen to new Aggros music, find the Chaos Magic video, and whatever else you want to throw out there for them to find you at, where to find you.
Well, please go to youtube.com/theaggros, AGGROS. And there you can see the video. And if you subscribe, you'll get notifications for all subsequent content, all the music videos. I'm going to do playthroughs, and I'm actually going to do a little segment called Guitars Are for Life, where I'm going to tell the stories of my guitars. Oddly enough, every one of my guitars has a crazy story. And I found just by calling around that I have a bunch of friends like Kirk Winstead from Down said he's going to do one. And I shot the first one already with Sean from the Toilet Boys. And everybody seems to have a really good story. So I'm going to do this little segment called Guitars for Life. That'll be on there. And I'll figure out some other stuff to keep people interested. And then I have the website aggros.nyc, and it has, your traditional store and info, and hopefully one day it'll have tour information. And, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Parris Mayhew or the Aggros. And I appreciate you sharing all this with your audience.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on. And obviously, when we hear some new Aggros, we'd love to have you back on and talk more about it. For sure.
Absolutely, and I swear to God, I won't be in bed.
Hey, man, better
jump up and grab my Rush shirt.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. All right, Parris, it was great talking to you, buddy, and have a good one, man. We'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
All right, great talking to you guys.
All right, take care, buddy.
Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.